And this one may require some explaining. It should show up on that monitor.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Save you bending around. Take a moment to just review that.
Your Honor, could we have a date? It has timestamps, but we have no idea when this was occurring.
That's fair. Leave it January. Back up. Tell us when that conversation took place.
That one should have been in February.
The 4th, maybe?
The 4th.
So we're talking about February the 4th, 2019.
Yes, sir.
It gets a little bit confusing because at the top of this document, it's got a January 1, but that's when the screenshot was taken as opposed to the actual conversation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when the defendant is telling you I can administer that, what's she talking about?
She had texted me and told me that she had pneumonia, and she was still coughing really bad, and she wanted to know if she could get some steroids. She asked me if I told her that was fine. I usually do pills. She asked for a shot. So I was going to give her that, send it in for her to the pharmacy, and I asked her if she wanted me to come by and give it to her. She said no, that she could administer it.
And what did you prescribe for her pneumonia?
Solumedrol.
Generally speaking, what is that?
That is a steroid.
And that's the medication you offered to in pill form, but she wanted an injectable.
Prednisone pill form, but she wanted an injection. She asked for Solumedrol.
Okay. And an injection, is there any way to use the item you prescribed, the specific item, without needles?
No.
To the next item. Where the defendant's telling you about the morning of February 6th.
Yes.
From a physician's assistant's perspective, is there any significance to 103 degree temperature?
Well, you're pretty sick, probably.
Okay. It seems like such a stupid question, but I got to ask it anyhow. How would anybody determine their precise temperature to 103 degrees?
By taking it with a thermometer.
Potentially not. But that's a first time indicator on it. Telling you that Mr. Cochran is sick too, correct? Just a moment. you recall getting a request from JD, your husband, to come to the Cochran home?
Yes, I do.
About what time was that?
About he had came and told me that Natalie had texted him and said she needed help, and he was going to her house. So he left, and 30 minutes later, I want to say 12:30-ish, he called me and told me that Mike was sick and that he needed me to stop by the house. And I said, for what? And he said, because I cannot get her to take him to the hospital, and I'm hoping that if you come here that you can convince her to take him to the hospital.
Did you go to the Cochran house?
I did. I was headed to a meeting at the Board of Education, so I said I would stop on my way. And I think I got there at like 1:11 is what my timestamp said.
When you got there, what did you see?
Michael was laying on the couch. John, one thing on the phone that John had asked me to do was to bring a thermometer, that Natalie didn't have one. So when I got there, he was laying on the couch sleeping. Michael was laying on the couch sleeping. She had the blood pressure cuff on his arm. There was numbers on it as if it had just been taken. She had the pulse ox on his finger, which monitors like oxygen rate and pulse rate. And that all looked normal. Nothing alarmed me when I saw the numbers. The only thing I had with me was the thermometer that they had asked me to bring, which was a ear scan. I walked over to him and
Walked over to Michael?
to Michael. He was laying on the couch, and went to take his temperature and told him, Michael, this is Stephanie, because I knew how Michael was. If he had just woke up and saw me standing there, he might punch me. So I said, Michael, it's Stephanie. Don't hit me. I'm going to take your temperature. And he turned his head towards me. I took his temperature. It was fine. And then he was laying on the couch. They had a recliner that kind of sat behind the couch. And I sat down in the recliner. So his head was behind. I was behind his head. He was in there. And talked to Natalie and John for a few minutes to see what had happened and what was going on.
What were you told had happened?
I was told that, I knew.
Unless it's a statement of the defendant, I object to hear.
Fair enough. Did the defendant tell you what happened? Did Natalie Cochran tell you what happened?
Yes.
What did she say?
She told me that they had been sick that morning, which she had said through text. She said he was throwing up and he had a seizure or something in the kitchen and fell on the floor.
Did anyone tell you that, did the defendant tell you he hit his head at all?
No. I asked her 3 times if he hit his head, and she said no.
Okay. When you were able to physically see Michael Cochran, could you see any evidence that he hit his head?
No.
Did you look for that?
I was sitting behind him. He was laying on the couch, and as we were talking and her explaining how it went, I was, looking at his. I didn't see any, scratches or bumps or any bleeding or anything from his head at all.
Did you talk back and forth with Michael Cochran that morning?
Not that, just at the house when I said I was going to take his temperature. That's all I said to him.
Did he say anything in response to
No.
that?
He turned his head to me.
Did you ever hear Michael Cochran say anything during the time you were there?
No.
Was he awake or asleep at the time?
Sleep.
Total time, if you were estimating that you were in the house, would be what?
28 minutes.
28 minutes. Of the 28 minutes, during that period of time, Michael Cochran was on the couch.
Mhm.
The defendant was present.
Yes.
Was John there too?
Yes.
Jake, your husband?
Mhm.
Was anybody else there?
No.
Did you get a picture of Michael on the floor in the kitchen at any time, or did that just go to other people?
I did not get the picture by text.
Did you ever see that picture?
Yes.
When did you see it?
Natalie showed it to me at the house.
While you were there?
Mhm.
That's it? Who is that?
That's Michael.
After you left the house, what was the next contact you had with the defendant?
I had went to a meeting, and when I come out of the meeting, I texted her to check on things because when I left there, she said she was going to let him sleep it off.
Did you ever advise her not to have him checked by anybody?
Never.
What did you specifically advise her?
That he needed to be checked. She told me that he had a history of seizures, and he had stopped taking his medication. And I said, he has to be checked. I said, even people with the history of seizures, anytime they have one, they need to be checked. We never know which one's damaging. And she said she was going to let him check it off. I kept offering, like, I would go with her. We would go, we could bypass Raleigh General if that's not what they were wanting to do. We could go to Charleston. She said he wasn't happy at Charleston either. I mentioned Princeton. Nothing was good enough. I said, well, let's call Chris and see if he'll get, the airplane. I'm sure he'll fly him somewhere.
Chris, we're talking about
Chris Davis.
Did she accept any of those suggestions?
No, she said she was going to let him sleep it off.
So if you were quoted as the one that said, I'm going to let him sleep, I think you should let him sleep it off, you didn't say that.
Never.
That came from her, not you.
Yes.
Now, after you left, and other than text messages just to check on people, were you ever made aware that the defendant's sister was at her house?
Yes. She told me in text message her sister was there and they had changed his clothes.
Did you find out why it was necessary to change Michael's clothes?
She said they cleaned the urine off, so I assumed he had lost muscle control and wet himself.
What was the significance to that to you as a physician's assistant?
That he had lost muscle control. So he needed to be in the hospital.
Around that same time, the defendant reported some vital signs to you, correct?
Yes.
What's the significance of any of those?
I'm sorry, what?
What, from a physician's assistant perspective, what's the clinical significance of those numbers?
Those numbers are good except for his respirations are down. His blood pressure is a little up.
Anything to be particularly worried about?
Yeah, the respirations are low.
What about the blood glucose? Did you check the...
Never. I don't have one.
So if that number came from the defendant and not you,
Right.
did you ever check his blood glucose?
No, I don't have one.
And blood glucose is another word for what?
Blood sugar.
that same day, you get another text from the defendant. From your perspective, what does she mean by that first line, just like the back?
He was in the hospital in November. He was sick. He had gotten sick. They went to Charleston, and she had told us that night that he was in Charleston that they thought he had a brain tumor. So at 10 o'clock that night, John and I left to go down there to be with her. He was out of it at the hospital, but he kept waking up, like combative. But they were giving him like benzodiazepines at the hospital to sedate him. So I took it. She was saying that he was sick like he was in the hospital.
From your perspective, was it the same on February 6th of 2019 as it had been in late fall of 2018?
Yes, and the fact that he was given medicine for sedation.
All right, well, would you please raise your right hand, sir? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right. I would normally say you may be seated, but you're standing at your desk, and so you can remain so. Before we get started, let me explain to the jury, ladies and gentlemen, you are watching this next witness on video. You should regard his testimony in the same manner as you would if he were right here in the courtroom amongst us. So assess his testimony and the credibility thereof, just like you would any other witness that is called to appear to the witness stand here. With that, Mr. Truman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Dexter, would you please spell both your first and last name for the court reporter?
Yes, sir. So legal first name is Michael, Michael. Last name is Nexen, Nexsen. Middle name is Cortland, hence the name Court.
How do you spell Cortland?
Court.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was Cortland. I beg your pardon. Mr. Dexter, could you tell us your background, please, and specifically your employment and education?
Yes, sir. And if it's helpful, I am loud by nature. If I need to talk louder or quieter, Mr. Truman, please just tell me. And first and foremost, the judge and jury, I truly appreciate you all letting me do this virtually. Grew up in the state of Virginia, Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia for undergrad. Started my career in New York City in finance. Came back to business school at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia. Have stayed put there ever since to raise a family. And for 6 years worked for what was U.S. Trust, and that became Bank of America's private bank. I currently own and run a farm estate and residential real estate company in Charlottesville, Virginia, called McLean Faulkner Incorporated.
Thank you. Could you tell us your initial involvement with Natalie and Michael Cochran?
Yes, sir. So my job at the time it was U.S. Trust at Bank of America's private bank was I led a team that dealt with high net worth individuals and families, from investing money to banking to helping kind of oversee their assets. And so in Charlottesville, I was tasked with new business development and kind of being the face of the team for potential new clients. And so somewhat out of the blue, the Cochrans were routed to my team, which came to my desk to interact and speak with them.
In terms of the division of your time with the Cochrans, did you spend more time involved with Natalie Cochran or Michael?
The bulk of it was with Natalie. The only thing I recall is one time there was a gentleman on the phone there in the car who said it was Michael Cochran. The rest was pretty much exclusively with Mrs. Cochran.
How did you communicate with the defendant?
So it was interesting. If my memory serves, it was almost like a phone call out of the blue, and kind of listened to the story and kind of how they got routed. And then primary conversations were email driven as well as some phone conversations.
Do you remember your first, or have a recollection of your first phone call conversation with Natalie Cochran?
High level at a macro point, essentially it was someone talking about very large sums of money, talking about business interests, and I get the sense because of the level or the amount of money they are discussing, and even though it was involved with businesses, it all tied back to an individual, and that's what U.S. Trust or a private bank deals with, and so not exactly sure how, but it makes sense that if the Cochrans are talking to the business banking world of Bank of America, that entity would have flagged and said, you need to speak with U.S. Trust. And given the West Virginia location, I believe the Charlottesville, Virginia office would have been the closest in proximity, and that's how things kind of got routed to me.
All right, sir. You indicated phone calls, but your primary means of communication was through email. Is that correct?
I would say it started with a phone call, and while there were some calls initially, it was then very email driven, and I don't want to jump ahead. As things kind of played out, the bulk of it was driven through email.
Your Honor, the defense has reviewed the document that the state would mark as State 4.
Yes, number 4.
All right.
Can I see it again? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I beg your pardon.
Could I please have exhibit 3?
It's at bottom. It's over there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let's see. Yeah. But also, what are you?
All right, you may continue, Mr. Truman.
Thank you. Mr. Nexon, the first email that the state wanted to discuss is where it was dated February 4th of 2019 at 11:55. And so that we can identify your emails, they all have a ustrust.com email address, correct?
Correct.
And in that email, you're merely providing personal contact information to the defendant, how she can get a hold of you with a direct line, right?
Correct, yes, sir. If it's helpful, Mr. Truman, I have that email in front of me.
Okay. Well, through the miracle of modern Chinese technology, we're able to hook you up this way with a telephone and through the internet, but unfortunately we can't display the documents at the same time, so we'll just talk about them. But thank you. The next email is the following day, and you received an email from the defendant at about 11:11, timed 11:11. You able to look at that email?
Yes, sir.
What's the substance of the defendant's information to you and your response?
So after the initial phone conversation, our job is to kind of follow certain procedures, protocol, information gathering. And so in order to do anything with our team, we have to document certain pieces of information. And so we kind of asked Mrs. Cochran for certain pieces of information that would help us slowly start to effectively build a relationship and establish the accounts. And so that's what we had asked her for after that initial phone call in order to start slowly moving forward.
Your Honor, may we approach on all of this?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, continue, please, Mr. Truman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Bear with me just a moment, Your Honor. We had to kind of adjust here on the fly.
Okay.
How was this account initially set up?
The account, so, and I don't want to jump ahead, I mean, high level, when we receive a phone call like we did, which is throwing out really big numbers, our job is we have to take it seriously to see if it's real. I think our initial instinct was this probably isn't real, but we will take every step. And so first you have to make sure that the human beings are real, that the business entities are real. And so you're going through methodical steps to document various characteristics of the individuals in the business. And so that's kind of, before anything happens, we're basically, you can call it papering or documenting the individual and the family to get everything set up. And as you can imagine, you're dealing with one of the largest banks in the entire country, if not world. Everything is going to be documented and in a good way scrutinized. And so that's kind of these initial steps, which is we are just data gathering to see if this is real or not.
Were there any funds in this account at this point?
So from our side, there was nothing. So essentially it was, we own these government contracting businesses. We're going to have significant funds coming and going from these accounts, which if it was real, U.S. Trust and the private bank would absolutely be the best place to go to do all this. And so at the time, there's nothing in these accounts. We are essentially getting everything set up or getting the piping in place to allow money to come into the accounts and then be a real source of financial help. But no, nothing, to my knowledge, at least from a U.S. Trust side, there's nothing ever in the account.
By February 5th of 19, approximately 5:36, and if you could take a quick glance at that email.
Okay, I have that, Mr. Truman.
Now, at this point, What was your understanding of the Cochran's intentions for the following day?
So, high level, if this was real, you would have
Judge, I'm
to...
going to object to this answer. Already at the beginning of this answer is non-responsive. We're talking about the travel of our clients, or my client, to the state of Virginia or North Carolina or wherever this gentleman was. We're not talking about high-level financial transactions. We're trying the money laundering case here.
We're not trying the money laundering case, but okay. Let's ask the question this way. Did you have a meeting set up with the Cochrans for February 6th of 2019?
So my understanding is they implied they were going to go to Lynchburg, Virginia. In order to set up these accounts, you have to physically sign a signature card. You have to have certain people witness this signature card. And I don't remember why they said they were going to Lynchburg. It could have been because of personnel or just certain requirements. But they had implied that they were going to go to Lynchburg. And again, a private bank or U.S. trust job is to white glove, handhold service. And it's not uncommon for us to pick people up from the airport, et cetera. So when I'm looking at this email, Mr. Truman, this was trying to make their meetings go as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. And that's what
Judge,
we're doing
this
in
is,
these
this
emails.
is a non-responsive
Trying to make sure they don't
objection,
lose
Your
money.
Honor. Objection. This is a
Hold
non-responsive.
on, Mr. Nixon.
This is a non-responsive answer. We're talking about the whole history of this. The prosecutor asked a very simple question, and the witness is rambling.
He's answering the question.
Overruled. Let's continue, please.
Thank you.
So guys, just reframe what you're trying to ask me. You're asking what we're doing, and we are trying to set up appropriate meetings and steps, all the appropriate steps to get certain accounts and relationships set up.
And that was to take place February 6th of 2019, correct?
Correct. That's what we were working towards. It looks like they said they were going to fly in, and so we were basically responding to their schedule and setting things up as best we could.
Did that meeting take place?
Never took place.
And you were notified about that Wednesday the 6th at 6:47 a.m. in an email from the defendant, correct?
Correct. And I have it. I'm just in my packet. Yes, I had cancer and was up all night, and so again, we responded accordingly. That we are sorry, and we're kind of taking cues from this prospective client on their schedule. But correct, no one ever went to Lynchburg. No meetings took place.
But there was a reference at 3:37 p.m. on February 6th. You got another email from the defendant. What was the substance of that one?
So if this is a large court, we'll shoot for Friday. Is that the email?
Yes.
Yeah, so again, looking to reschedule is how I and our team read it. Was they were looking to reschedule, and so we kept trying to be accommodative and helpful.
And once again, that meeting never took place either, did it?
Correct.
And I realize you're operating under somewhat of a handicap, but there's an email from the defendant of March 14th of 2019. Could you take a look at that one?
I have that in front of me, correct.
And what did the defendant indicate to you was going to happen then?
So rereading this email, they are asking for wiring information for their account. They've said that $100,000 is coming in. Other government funds are coming. And that she's emailing a death certificate and a state paperwork so we can remove Michael. So in the interim, we've been informed that Michael was in the ICU and then passed. And so in that interim, that's where we are as of March 14th, which is trying to move money around with these accounts.
And the last one was the next day, March 15th. The defendant indicates to you that she can't log into her account. Is that a reference to a U.S. bank account, or am I missing something?
I'm reading her email. She very easily could have had a Bank of America account.
I'm going to object to
Hold
this.
on, Mr. Nixon.
I'm going to object to the answer that has already been preceded with she could have easily done something. Either she did something or she didn't. So this is assuming facts in the evidence.
I think that's appropriate. Pose the question again, please, Mr. Truman, and I'll instruct the witness to please answer.
Court, this phrase in that email, I can't even log into my account, it was all set up by him. Did you take that as a reference to a U.S. bank or a Bank of America account, or is she talking about something else?
I don't know if she even had an account.
That's all the questions the state has. Thank you.
All right, cross-examination.
Did you ever talk to Michael Cochran about any of these transactions?
There is a gentleman on the phone at one time who would have been implied he was Michael Cochran. That's the only interaction I ever had with him. He was on the phone, supposedly in the car with Natalie, and this was early in the process. This would have been in February.
Okay. How many times did you talk to the prosecuting attorney's office in this case?
Can you repeat that?
How many times did you talk to the prosecuting attorney's office in this case? The lawyers in the prosecuting attorney's office?
If I remember, I think one time, maybe twice, and it was more to figure out if I could testify virtually, given kind of my location to the courthouse.
Among many, I would imagine thousands of transactions, you remember Natalie Cochran and you remember Michael Cochran.
I absolutely remember this, just given the nature of it, correct.
All right. Now, was Michael Cochran CC'd on all the communications that you had with Natalie Cochran?
I'm going back to the beginning of the email pack, and I can see Michael had a CSG LLC email address. And so he was on the early emails. And then I want to say she took over as point person. Yeah, he would have. Now, here, I mean, it just kind of depends on the email, sir. I mean, Michael had Natalie and Michael both had CSG LLC US email addresses.
All right. So he could have known about all the aspects of whatever transactions they were supposed to transpire with your bank, right?
Again, she ran point. He was only ever communicative of the very first phone call.
All right. The sum total of your testimony, Mr. Nixon, is that Michael Cochran and Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran were supposed to appear in your bank somehow. And they called off the appointment twice, right?
I'd say there's a little more to it than that, but if you don't want me to ad-lib.
No. I want you to answer my question. My question is, the sum total of your testimony is that they were supposed to have...
Objection. The subtotal of his testimony is his testimony, period.
Your testimony here today in this court is that they scheduled an appointment with you and didn't show up and canceled it, right?
I would say that's incorrect. She ended up typing checks and wrote false checks that our team knew, and this kind of all crumbled because you were dealing with a very sophisticated financial institution. Your Honor, I move to strike this answer and instruct the jury
Overruled. I'm going to allow the answer to stand.
All right.
please.
They wrote some checks that, I'm going to ask you this, sir, one more time, and I want you to answer yes or no. Did they schedule an appointment with you and canceled it?
Yes, they canceled multiple appointments, correct.
Did they schedule more than one appointment with you and canceled it?
To my knowledge, there have been 2 different in-person get-togethers, and then it all became email-driven communication.
How many appointments did they schedule with you? Mr. Nixon, please listen. How many appointments did they schedule with you and canceled?
In my recollection, 2. One was they said they were going to go to Lynchburg. She then had cancer.
I didn't ask you about that. I just...
Let him answer.
Wait a minute. I asked you a very simple question, sir. How many appointments did they schedule and cancel? And you said 2. Is that right?
2.
All right.
Yes.
Now, and the reason did they give you any reasons why they scheduled those appointments and canceled them?
Yes.
And the reason was that Natalie was sick, right?
For the first one, correct.
Okay, for the second one, what was the excuse for the second one?
That Mr. Cochran was in the ICU.
Okay? And then in March, Mr. Cochran was dead, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
To our knowledge, yes.
So now the sum total of your testimony really is that they had 2 appointments that they canceled because of the illness of Mr. Cochran or my client, and then the third appointment, Mr. Cochran was dead. Is that a fair statement, sir?
In terms of appointments, yes.
Okay, that's all I want right now. The next question is, you don't have any idea about the circumstances of Mr. Cochran's death, do you? You don't know anything, first-hand knowledge about this.
We, at our time, we saw a death certificate, and that's our extent.
Mr. Nixon, you're a banker. You are dealing with Mr. Cochran and Mrs. Cochran. You don't have any first-hand knowledge of Michael Cochran's death, do you?
Again, I've never met these people in person.
So the answer would
We
be
were
no.
told he died, and we were showed a death certificate.
So the answer from the first-hand knowledge of knowing anything about this case would be no. Would that be a correct statement?
In terms of his death,
Right.
I don't know how he died. I have a pretty damn good guess.
I move to strike this, Your Honor.
All right, I am going to grant that or sustain that objection. Ladies and gentlemen, please disregard the last answer given by the witness. Continue, please, Mr. Victor.
Mr. Nixon, you apparently don't like my client, do you?
I think it's been a colossal waste of my time and many others' times in terms of months of going through this. That's my honest answer. It's a lot of time, resources, yes.
And that's why you're so belligerent right now, aren't you?
I'm not belligerent, but you're being belligerent with me, and I'll answer the question.
I think I'm done with this witness.
All right, redirect Mr. Truman.
As a banker, would you be belligerent to the people that wrote a bunch of hot checks?
Judge, I'm going to object.
Wait, hold on, Mr. Nixon. Objection has been raised.
I'm going to object. This is back to money laundering, money that has nothing to do with murder.
Well, I think we've extended the circumstances a little bit and opened a door, so I'm going to allow the question. You can pose it again, please, Mr. Truman.
From a banker's perspective, people that write bad checks, is that something that would cause you some irritation?
And now this is a comment on my client character, and I object to that.
Well, I'm going to overrule the objection. Answer if you can, please, Mr. Nexon.
I'm happy to. The only thing we would do is we would properly flag what happened. We did flag it internally, and then we kind of shut down conversations. And so in a way, we literally just follow our procedures and guidelines. And that's what we did here when the bad checks were written, is that we stopped communicating and we flagged it to our fraud department.
The bad checks were written in March of 2019?
Correct, yeah.
That's all the questions the state asked. Thank you.
And no account was ever open with your bank, right?
So again, I'm not in the operations side. I just can't answer that confidently, given I just don't have the full scope of everything in Bank of America. She could have opened an account and never funded it. So yes, there were checks written against an account.
All right. Anything further, Mr. Truman?
Nothing for the state, Your Honor. Thank
Mr.
you.
Victor?
Mercifully, no, Your
May
Honor.
this
Thank you.
witness be excused?
So far as the state's concerned, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Did you and Michael Cochran exchange text messages?
I'm sure we did.
You're sure you did? Why?
Because we would probably text each other about every day.
Ugh. Is that showing up on your screen?
It is. It is now. Thank you.
Take a moment and review that, please.
Okay.
How do you know that that's a text from Michael's phone to your phone?
Well, I recall the conversation, but it also says Michael at the top, and it has the picture that was assigned to his number.
By
that,
your
that
phone?
makes sense. Yeah, by my phone. It was, and I recall the conversation.
We are so close, buddy. What does that mean?
He was very excited that he was finally going to get the money that he'd been waiting on from the federal government. And a lot of things had happened in between for the previous 2 months, maybe even 3 months. They had, what had been told was they were going through an audit. And then at that point in time,
Objection. I'm going to object to what the federal government was going to do that calls for hearsay.
That's fine. We can just stop right there. Now, this is a text with you and somebody else. Who else is involved in this text chain?
it says Natalie Cochran on the text that I'm reading. But there's someone else on there as well. It looks like it says 2 people, and unfortunately I can't see the top of that.
Would a good guess be Jennifer?
It probably would be.
Okay. There's a reference in here. If you could explain that to us. The Smith House? What's that about?
Yes, they.
Your Honor,
I was.
I'm going to object, but this so far seems to be the financial case retried. What's the relevance of all of this?
I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to allow the state to proceed. The objection's overruled.
Tell us about the circumstances where this text came to pass.
So what had happened the year before in 2018, I don't know the exact dates of when they purchased or were attempting to purchase homes at Flat Top Lake, but Mike and Natalie were, because I was not a part of that transaction until the gist of what happened in the text, but they were purchasing homes at Flat Top Lake from the Smiths. I'm not sure both homes are from the Smiths. My understanding, they bought a home for themselves and a home for Natalie's parents. And they were purchasing homes at Flat Top Lake because of the issues with their company with not receiving their funds from the government. The government was shut down. There was an audit that was ongoing, is what I believed and was told. But because they weren't getting any money, what was happening?
To any testimony based on hearsay, Your Honor.
All right, well, he said that's what he believed, and I think that's good enough. And perhaps we can stray from what he was told, but he indicated what he believed, and I'm going to allow that. The objection's overruled.
For our purposes today, what was your involvement in the Smith house?
They were going to let the houses go back. It's not necessarily a repossession, but ultimately because the contract wasn't fulfilled and they weren't buying the homes, these pieces of real estate, they were going to let the Smiths take the homes back. And the idea was, what will it take for them just to take the homes back, because she didn't want the houses anymore.
And you helped with that?
Yes, Robert Dunlap represented the Smiths, and there was a resolution document that I believe he prepared. Not really for sure who prepared it, but there was a resolution document that ultimately got resolved. It didn't happen at that point in time. It happened later after Michael passed, but that's what that's referencing.
And you were part of the negotiating of that, or resolving it?
Resolving that, yes.
Okay. Let's go to the 6th of February. Was that the first you were aware that there was a problem with Michael?
There were some other text messages between Natalie and I, and then there was a message from Mike as well that I think occurred earlier in the day.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I object to any text messages that are not being presented to us and they're not present in court.
Can I respond to
The
that?
references to
Sure.
There's no legal requirement the state's aware of that you have to present text messages. He has firsthand knowledge of it. He can testify about it.
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
So this wasn't the first that I knew that. I believe the question was that I knew that something was wrong. Mike was. So this wasn't the first time that morning that I knew that.
So this is an update?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, by 1:03, you were asked a question. Take a look at that.
Yes.
Had you noticed any odd behavior from him?
I had not. And actually, that's in my response. He hasn't been around. My question was, has he been around anything? Because the earlier messages that she had noted, that Natalie had noted, is that he was sick like last time, because he had been, he was sick in November. He was exposed, or my understanding was he was exposed to black mold while working on a rental home. And so that prompts the question, has he been around anything mold? And then into the supplements.
Did Michael express to you that he was sick because of mold exposure? Or did that come from another source?
That initially came from Natalie, because what I was told is they found mold spores in his spinal fluid when they did some type of medical exam in November. And then later, Mike may have said that as well. I don't remember if it come from him directly. More from him was about the story how they were working on the house and 2 contractors were there. They had masks. He did not.
The bottom of this text references Mexican supplements. Tell us what you know about Mexican supplements and Michael Cochran.
Unfortunately, I can't see the bottom of the text. I'm sorry. Okay. So this is the first time I've ever heard of anything about a Mexican supplement was on that day. I'd never heard Mike talk anything about supplements from Mexico or anywhere else.
So the sole source of that information is the defendant.
That's correct. Excuse me.
Take a look at this one from about 1:15.
I apologize. On my screen, the first thing I see is
Whoa.
1:18. I'm so sorry.
Or 18. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And we'll just.
I'm sorry, yes.
Did Michael advise you of what kind of supplements he was taking?
No, Mike. When Mike would talk about his supplements with me, it was always his GNC, what he would take for his workout supplements. I mean, he never went into any detail about the specificity of the supplements. Probably the most specificity we got into it was he would talk about how Natalie prepared the supplements that he was taking and would then, in essence, manage those according to him.
There's also a reference to seizure medications. What's that about?
My understanding is from November, because of the exposure to black mold while he was at CAMC, there was a determination that he was now having seizures. And so he was prescribed seizure medication, and that's the reference.
November to February, do you know, did he talk to you about taking his seizure medication?
He talked to me about his, yes, he talks about the seizure medicine to the extent he was working on his pilot's license, and that was something he really wanted to get. It was also something that he wanted to do in the future. And we talk about the seizure medicine, how he said, well, I'm not going to be able to fly, I'm not going to be able to do this. We would actually have a lot of dialogue about that, because I'd encourage him. Obviously, I'm a pilot, and that was something that we were going to do together, and he'd enjoy. And I would remind him and tell him, no, you'll still be able to fly. You may have a medical restriction or something like that, but you'd be able to fly. So we did discuss these seizure meds.
The last message I want you to review is this.
Yes.
There's a couple things that came to your attention in this, one of which is the defendant reported to you that about his condition at the time.
That's correct.
And then she informs you that he wet himself.
Prosecutor is leading.
That's fine.
All right, perhaps you could read.
Your Honor, we're good with that. Mr. Davis, did there come a time on February the 6th of 19 when you went to the Cochran house?
Yes.
How did that come to pass?
I was at my son's basketball game at Beckley Stratton and got a text from Natalie saying, asking me could I come by the house after the game. Through that dialogue, I'm not for sure if I asked the question first or it was volunteer first, but there was another family friend that was at the home at that time, Thomas Treadway, and she indicated Thomas thinks he's getting worse. Could you come by? Because we had been, my wife and I, we'd been texting through the day, like checking on how's he doing, what's going on. We're told vitals are good, people are here, he's fine, all these different things. And then I got that text. I don't remember the exact time, but I'm going to say probably around 6:30ish or something like that, and asked me to come to the house after the game.
What did you do in response to that request?
Well, I said I could come immediately, and I ultimately went to the home.
When you arrived, what did you see?
So when I pulled in the driveway, there were multiple cars in there. Walk into the home, go into the house. It's fairly quiet. My impressions from that is because Mike's laying on the couch, sleeping, but he's laying there and he's snoring. And so when I get there, of course, Natalie's there. Thomas Treadway's there, her sister Penny Carrico Lowry's there. Penny's husband is there as well. It seems like to me that maybe someone else. I thought that maybe their daughter Nikki was there. I just can't remember. But we're in the living room, they have a big, large living room. We walk in and they're just people are standing there. And he's on the couch.
What did you think should take place at that point?
Well, my first question was, my text message says he's getting worse, and I want to know what does that mean? What's he worse? So I asked. It was kind of everybody was whispering because he's laying there, and it's like hey, what's going on? And how's he worse? Well, he's just not responding. Okay, and so I go over to him.
Take a moment. You're okay.
Difficult now because I know the outcome.
When you went to him, what did you do?
So I go over to him and I'm like, "Hey, man, you need to wake up." Kind of shove him, wiggle him a little bit. We were told that Natalie had told us, because that's who it specifically came from, that he had fallen and hit his head earlier. So I'm actually looking for, like, do I see anything? And we've been told about this seizure that he supposedly had, and I don't know what happens when you have a seizure, the outcome, or so I'm just looking. So I'm trying to kind of nudge him, wake him up, shake him. Hey man, you need to get up. You need to get up. Hey buddy, you got to talk to me. And he's just laying there, and it's he's non-responsive. He's just laying there. So at that point in time, I was just kind of looking at his face. I was worried about his head, and I asked, does he have a knot on his head? Is there anything on his head? Because he's laying on his back, so he's laying on his head, So I asked, is there a knot? Is there anything back there on his head? And I believe the responses were no. I'm looking like in his nose and like his ear to see if I maybe see blood or anything. Mike didn't like anybody to touch his face, and not that I'd have any time to touch his face, but I knew he didn't like people touching his face. And my understanding was that when he was younger, there was a fire, and whatever the case. But so I tell him, and I'm like, hey man, I'm going to touch your head. If don't hit me, you know, because his arm. I'm like, don't hit me, and it was almost like not. I think we may have, you know, almost like kind of smiled and laughed, like, hey, you know, because it's Mike. I'm like, hey buddy, don't hit me. I'm going to touch your head. And so I reached down and I looked in his eyes. I'm not really for sure what I was even looking for. To be honest, I was really looking for like maybe trauma, blood, or something. And his eyes, you know, they were fine. They weren't rolled back or anything like that. But anyway, and so after that, Thomas is standing there too, and Thomas does a sternum rub on him, where he took his knuckle, rubbed his sternum, and I just remember saying, man, hey buddy, I'm gonna take you to the hospital. I'm gonna take you to the hospital. So you gotta help me here. Are you okay? What's going on? Are y'all, you know? And so no response. At that point in time, I went down to his feet. My father had a massive stroke years ago, and I just remember the doctors told us then.
About statements by doctors, about fathers, I object to that.
I'm going to overrule the objection. You can continue, Mr. Day.
Thank you, Your Honor. So ultimately, I go to his feet and like rub the bottom of his feet, because my understanding, if you were to do that, how the feet respond, the toes respond, can indicate something, you know, a brain injury or a head or something like that. And I remember that because of what my dad went through. So I did that on both of his feet, and it was clear that something was wrong. And I was like, he's got to go to the hospital, and he's got to go now.
Did you enforce that command?
He was going to the hospital, and so I don't want to say I enforced that on anyone, but I remember a question is, you really think he should go? Yes, he needs to go, and he's going to go now, and I'm going to take him, and that's exactly what I did.
Had you ever taken him to the hospital before?
I had. The November incidents that we're referring to, the exposure to black mold, he went to the hospital. It was close, like maybe like a Wednesday, Friday. I can't remember, real close in time. And those two times, he was sick. He, again, wasn't feeling well, and throwing up. And it was to his house. Went to his house, and he you could tell obviously he wasn't feeling good. He was struggling, and those, he said he wanted to go. He said, take me. He said, I'll go. I want to go to the hospital. Take me to the hospital.
And that was in November of 18?
Yes.
Was there another time you took him to?
Those were close. They were twice in the same incident. He went to CAMC at first, and then came home for a few days, and then was still sick, not feeling well, and then went back to CAMC.
Can I have just a moment, please? Can I have a moment? February the 6th of 2019. Had you been at the Cochran house?
Yes. On my way to work, my wife had me drop off a flu care package is what I thought it was, because we were told that Natalie was sick and not feeling well, and I don't remember the time, but I went. I wasn't in the Cochran home. I went to their house. At the front of their house, they had these doors that were almost kind of like there were glass doors. They looked like they both opened. I don't know if they both opened or not. I think one of them maybe opened. And so I opened the door, put the bag there, and left. I didn't see anybody or wasn't in the home until later.
So the first time you were at the Cochran house, you stayed outside. The second time was when you went inside, and that ended up with a trip to the hospital.
That's correct.
Did you look in the bag that you dropped off?
I did not.
Where'd you get the bag?
My wife.
That's all the questions the state has. Thank you.
Cross-examination, Mr. Vick.
Mr. Davis, you testified on direct that on February 5th of 2019, Michael was a normal Michael, right? No problems, no nothing.
I don't remember any problems he was having on the 5th.
Do you remember Michael on October 30th of 2018?
Not specifically to that day.
Okay. Would there be something that would alert you to Michael being ill or Michael being sick or not himself or anything like that?
I don't remember that specific day. Are you referencing, is that when he went to the hospital in what I believe to be the 1st of November?
The day before he went to the hospital in October of 2018.
No, I don't recall the day before without any type of something to refresh that.
Nothing, however, would indicate that he was so sick that he would have to go to the hospital on October 30th, right?
Not that I recall.
And yet on October 31st, he was in a hospital with some pretty serious conditions, wasn't he?
I don't recall the specific dates you're giving, so that's why I can't answer your question. But if this is in reference to when he was hospitalized at CAMC,
Okay.
then you would be correct. He was hospitalized for several days for the black mold and the seizure.
Hold on, Mr. Davis. He went to the hospital on October 1st, on October 31st, and you don't recall anything as far as October 30th, whether he was in sad shape, whether he was in good shape, or anything of the nature.
I don't. I just
Okay.
remember
You
the day
don't.
he was sick. He was
The answer
sick and
is you
throwing
don't.
up.
Is that right?
I-
Yes or no?
Repeat the question, please.
The question is you don't recall whether he was good, bad, indifferent, or whether he felt bad, or anything of that kind. Yes or no?
The day before he went to
Right.
the hospital?
That's right.
I don't recall the day before he went to the hospital.
But then he went back to the hospital on November the 2nd. Do you remember how he behaved on November 1st?
Yes, he was. He wasn't feeling well. He was sick. The days between when he went to CAMC the first time
He was sick that day?
and he came home, and he was home and sick for the next 2 days, whatever that day is in those, and then
And that's why he
went
went
back
to the hospital.
the second time. Correct.
Okay. And you said that on, I guess, February 5th, he did not appear to be in any distress or anything of that kind.
I think what I said is I don't recall
Okay.
he was in distress on the 5th. I don't remember the 5th unless there's a specific event or place or time. I don't remember the 5th.
Do you remember talking to Lieutenant Bledsoe, who interviewed you in this case, on or about, March 22nd, 2019?
I do.
Is it true that you told Lieutenant Bledsoe that in February of 2019 you observed Michael Cochran to mentally struggle while he was assisting you in installing a ceiling fan? Remember that?
I don't remember the statement specifically, but I do remember the event. We were putting a ceiling fan up in my house, and he would do the wiring.
I asked you, Mr. Davis, please listen. I asked you whether do you remember that conversation with Lieutenant Bledsoe?
I don't remember the specific conversation with Lieutenant Bledsoe.
Do you remember? Well, all right. Is it true that in February of 2019, Michael Cochran was struggling mentally and was not feeling good?
He was stressed, waiting on his money.
I didn't ask you that.
And
I asked
so
you whether
I don't.
yes or no, sir. Did he act mentally? Did he struggle mentally? Tell me yes or no.
I believe that, again, he was definitely struggling because of his stress.
I didn't
and
ask
what
you
was
why,
going on.
sir.
So I do believe he was
Your
struggling
Honor,
mentally.
Your Honor, I'm sorry. Please instruct the witness to answer my question.
I think he did answer it towards the last. So let's move on.
Did he appear sick to you?
No, he didn't appear sick.
Okay. You observed him as having outbursts of stress and anger that wasn't like him. True? That's what you
Yeah.
told the officer, isn't it?
I don't recall what I told the officer and what you're reading from, but if I told the officer that, that would probably be true. And because, again, he was very stressed.
Okay. Did you have any knowledge of Michael Cochran taking any type of supplements or any type of steroids or anabolics to further his bodybuilding physique?
Mike took supplements. He did not, to my knowledge, take steroids or anabolics
Okay.
for that purpose.
Okay.
It was generally workout supplements is what he referred to.
He took supplements. And did Michael have a seizure either in October of 2018 or November 2018?
I don't recall. I don't think so. I was
Okay.
never told that.
But on November the 2nd of 2006, he went to the hospital with the conditions eerily similar, if not identical, to the conditions that you saw him in on February the 6th. Would that be a case, sir?
I didn't know Mike in 2006. I don't know of
I
any
mean, on
incident.
2006. I'm sorry, sir. In 2018, on November the 2nd, he went to the hospital with the same or extremely similar conditions that you found him in February of 2019.
No, he did not.
No, he did not.
Because in February of 2019, he was unresponsive. In November of 2018, he was talking to me, vomiting, and participating in wanting to go to the hospital. So they were two different.
So if there was testimony that he was sleeping in the hospital, perhaps under some type of anesthesia or some type of medication, that would not be true? Or would that be true?
I don't think I understand your question. When is he sleeping in the hospital that
In
you're referring to?
November of 2018, when he is in the hospital, between November the 2nd and the November the 6th, there was a time when he was asleep in the hospital. Do you remember that time? You were there with him, I presume.
I'm sure he was asleep when he was in the hospital. I don't remember any particular time that you're referencing. When he went to the hospital, they treated him, And was he in the hospital and treated at some time and sleeping in the hospital? I think that's probably true.
Now, was he sleeping in some form of induced coma, or was he in some type of under some type of medication? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I know that he goes to the hospital, they admit him, and they're treating him, and he is in the hospital.
And then they tell you, because you told the police officer, that Michael, well, let's start with that. Michael is combative, right? Michael doesn't want to be in a hospital.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be in the hospital. What, are we referencing November?
Did he want to be in a hospital in November of 2018?
He asked me to take him to the hospital. While he was in the hospital, did he want to leave the hospital? Yes.
Did he claim that he would never go back to a hospital to you?
Over the 10 years I knew him, he probably claimed several times he didn't want to go back to the hospital.
Now, you learned that Michael may have had a mass on his brain, didn't you?
That's correct. That's what we were told while we were waiting in the hospital in November.
Okay. And then the diagnosis was somewhat changed to the swelling of the brain, correct?
That's probably correct. I don't remember that specifically. We didn't have interaction with the doctors. We're being told these things. So I just don't remember that specifically.
But you learned that Michael had a whole series of extremely serious medical conditions as he was discharged from the hospital.
No, my understanding is that he had seizures. He was exposed to black mold, and through that they determined he has seizures, and he was placed on medicine. That's the only medical conditions that we were ever told.
All right, let me ask you this. You learned that he had encephalopathy, right? Brain swelling. Did you or did you not?
I don't recall that diagnosis,
You don't recall.
but I would
Okay.
defer to
Do
those
you-
medical
do you-
records.
If you don't
and if they
recall
say it, then I believe
Mr.
it
Davis,
exists.
Your Honor, Mr. Davis, I asked you a simple question. Do you recall being told that Michael had encephalopathy? Do you or don't you?
I was never told his diagnosis.
Okay. No, any diagnosis?
Other than he had seizures and was exposed to
Okay.
black mold.
Okay. Were you told that he had seizure-like activities? Were you or not?
I was told he had seizures.
Okay.
I wasn't told in your
Yes
word.
or no,
he had-
sir?
I'm answering your question. You
Yes
said that
or no?
he has seizure-like
Yes or no, Mr.
activities.
Davis?
And I've
Your
never
Honor,
was told he had
please
seizure-like
instruct the
activities.
witness to answer my question.
Mr. Victor, pose the question, please.
Did you learn that he had seizure-like activity prior to going to the hospital, Mr. Davis? Yes or no?
Going to the hospital in November?
Yes.
No.
No. All right. Did you learn that he had conditions such as urinary retention, chronic sinusitis, confusion, brain swelling? Did you learn about these conditions?
No.
No. Okay. So if you told Lieutenant Bledsoe otherwise, that would not be true, right?
Again, I would defer to the medical records. If those medical records said that, and at some point in time I recalled that through the medical record and repeated that, then it would be accurate. I'm saying today I don't recall hearing those specific diagnoses.
Did you know that Mr. Cochran was prescribed medication for encephalopathy by Dr. Ward? Did you know that or not?
Is that seizure medicine?
Did you know that he was prescribed the medication for brain swelling by Dr. Ward? Did you or not?
I don't know if I know. He was prescribed seizure medicine. I don't know if that's what that is, Mr. Vicker. If it is, then yes, I knew it. If it's not seizure medicine, then no, I did not know.
Okay. Did you know whether he religiously took that medication as prescribed by the doctor? Did you? Or did you not?
We were told by Natalie that he stopped taking
No,
the
I'm
medicine.
not asking you about Natalie. Did you know from Mr. Cochran or from anybody else but Natalie that he was taking that medication as ordered by the doctor?
Yes, he indicated to me he was taking his seizure medication in December.
Okay. How about January?
He never specifically told me he was taking it or he was not taking it, and that our conversations were more about flying as it related to the seizure medicine.
Prior to February the 6th, you were advised that Natalie Cochran had a flu and she was sick. Yes or no?
Yes, prior to February 6th, she was sick with flu-like symptoms.
Flu-like symptoms. And you were also advised that Mr. Cochran was sick that day. Yes or no?
On February 6th? Yes.
Okay. As you sit here today, you do not know what caused Mr. Cochran's condition on February the 6th. You have no personal knowledge of that.
I have no personal knowledge.
Now, did you know that he was taking a whole slew of medications, such as, for example, Keppra? Do you know what Keppra is?
I have no clue. And I knew no medicine that he was taking other than when he would reference seizure medicine. Outside of that, I didn't know of any other medicine he was taking.
Did you know that he was diagnosed with an acute respiratory failure, sir, when he was in the hospital?
I think we were told by Natalie he had that.
How about convulsive status epilepticus, epilepsy, perhaps? Did you know that?
I don't recall ever hearing that from anyone.
So if those were the diagnoses from the hospital in February of 2019, you wouldn't have any reason to debate the knowledge of the medical experts. He was so confused that he didn't even remember driving his own car.
He remembered driving his truck. He just didn't remember where he parked.
I see. He wasn't confused about who drove the truck? No? Okay. He told you on several occasions that he felt sick. How was he sick? What did he tell you?
It was after we got finished working on a house that he had gotten into some black mold. He would just complain about dizziness and stuff.
Did he complain about dizziness and lightheadedness in January of 2019?
I don't recall.
Did he complain about feeling sick in February, at the beginning of February of 2019?
I don't recall February. I would say more in December.
More in December. Well, he told you he had a seizure in, I would imagine, December or January December of 2018 or January 2019, didn't he?
I don't recall him
You don't
telling me
recall.
about a seizure. No.
Okay? And he told you at the beginning of February, didn't he, that he felt another one coming? Didn't he?
No.
Now you're denying that? Okay. What did he complain of, sir, when he was telling you that he didn't feel good?
He would complain about just not feeling right, just feeling dizzy.
Not feeling right, how?
Felt like he said he felt like he'd been poisoned.
He felt like he was poisoned. All right. Did you witness Mr. Cochran's illness in November of 2018?
I was with him in the hospital.
Okay. He lost consciousness, right?
He never lost consciousness. I think they sedated him while he was in the hospital.
He felt lightheaded. Right? He had a seizure, perhaps?
I don't know.
Okay. You don't really know the exact problems that Mr. Cochran had that landed him in a hospital in November of 2018, do you?
No.
And he complained to you about the same symptoms in December and January, or December 2018 and January 2019, that he had when he went to the hospital in October or November of 2018, didn't he?
I wouldn't say it was the same symptoms, no.
No? Yeah. You went to the Cochran's home on numerous occasions, you testified.
I did.
The bedroom in the Cochran's home was upstairs, correct?
All the bedrooms was.
Okay. And the kitchen was downstairs. And it was not directly, well, and the steps leading to, well, from upstairs to downstairs were not exactly leading straight to the kitchen. The kitchen was still some rooms away from the stairs, right?
Correct.
So if somebody well, let me strike that. Michael was a pretty big guy, wasn't he? How much did he weigh, to your estimation?
Probably 200 pounds.
200 pounds. And so if he was injected with some poison in bed upstairs, a singular person such as Natalie Cochran would have to drag him downstairs all the way to the stairs, then downstairs, and then through the whole house into the kitchen, right? Would you consider that possible?
Assuming that's what happened.
Assuming that's what happened. There was nobody else in the house when you arrived, correct?
Correct.
With Mr. Miller, right?
Just me and Mr. Miller, yes.
Right. And so the only person who would have injected him in the bed and upstairs and who would drag him downstairs would have been Natalie Cochran, right?
I mean, this is pretty speculative.
Yeah, I think it is. Is that an objection,
Okay.
Mr. Truman?
It is, I'm
All right.
sorry.
I
Should've said
think
that.
I'll sustain the objection. And Mr. Bowen, if you could say yes or no, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
I'm having a little difficulty understanding your responses.
I apologize, Your Honor.
No problem.
Mr.
Go
Bowen,
ahead.
when you were, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Mr. Bowen, when you were in the Cochran's house on February the 6th,
Yes.
did you observe my client, Natalie Cochran, checking Mr. Cochran's blood sugar?
I did.
She did that, didn't she? All right. You knew Mr. Cochran as a, well, let's say bodybuilder, an athlete, right?
He was definitely an athlete, yes.
Yes. He really cared about his
His
physique,
physique.
his health, his body.
Yes.
But he cared about his health in terms of his outward appearance, right?
He liked he liked feeling healthy.
He was what? I'm
He
sorry.
liked feeling healthy.
Feeling healthy. And would you say that he was very happy when he was physically fit?
I would.
So in pursuit of that fitness, sir, would you agree with me that he was taking a lot of pills that were going to increase his appearance, right?
I don't know about that. I know he took supplements. There's many kinds of supplements.
All kinds of supplements, right?
Hmm. Yes.
To increase his vitality, to increase his physicality.
Hmm.
Right.
Yes.
Well, how many of the, well, do you know what those supplements were?
I do not.
Well, how many of them did he take?
I don't know.
Well, you were in their home frequently. Did you witness Mr. Cochran taking as many as 30 and 35 pills at a time?
I did not.
You did not? What did you witness?
I never witnessed him taking any supplements.
Okay. So how do you know that he was taking supplements? He told you?
He told me.
All right. Did you also know that he was injecting medicine into his body?
I did not.
Okay. Did he ever tell you that?
No.
All right. What did Michael Cochran do for a living?
He ran data cable, AV cable. It was his profession.
Okay. Well, did he have two businesses that he ran? TSM, or TSG, whatever.
Yes, TSM. He ran with Natalie.
Did he ever talk to you about the government contracts?
Mm-hmm. He
What did he
did.
say? What did he say he did for those government contracts?
He said he would research the government contracts online and send them to Natalie, and she would work on it and put a bid in.
He would research them, right?
Mm-hmm. He would find the contract, the specific listings for what they was doing.
Okay. Did you know that he suffered from brain swelling?
I was told yes,
Who told you that?
Natalie.
Did you? Were you curious after he came out of the hospital in November of 2019 what they told him about his health?
Yeah, I was curious. We was told that it was exposure to black mold.
It was just the exposure to black mold. Nobody mentioned anything about seizures. Nobody mentioned anything about enlarged heart. Nobody mentioned anything about brain swelling.
No.
Nobody. Okay. And who would that be? The doctors?
Natalie's who we got all of our information from.
Natalie. And did you inquire of Mr. Cochran himself? Buddy, what's wrong with you? What was wrong with you? What did the doctor say? Did you ever inquire?
We would ask him how he's feeling today or something like that, but he never told us any kind of diagnosis or anything like that. We never really talked about it. Once we was in the hospitals, when we got the information, we would just see how he's feeling day to day.
Well, he went to the hospital on October 31st
Mm-hmm.
and came out of the hospital, right?
Yes.
And he knew you. You guys worked together. You were almost buddies, right?
We was buddies, yes.
We was buddies. All right. Didn't you ask him? Well, hey, Bud, what did they say was wrong with you?
No.
No. But then he was in the hospital 2 days later
Mm-hmm.
with all these horrible symptoms and stayed in the hospital this time for 5 days. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. For 5 days. And you
Correct.
were there with him.
I was.
and then he comes out of the hospital and you do not bother to ask him, buddy, what did the doctor say? What was it?
It was always black mold exposure.
If I may have a second.
Certainly.
That's all I have of this witness, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well. Redirect Mr. Truman.
State has one redirect question. In response to defense counsel's question, you said that the defendant took the vital signs of Mr. Cochran?
That's
I
correct.
didn't say that, Your Honor. That's mischaracterized my question.
I think it is, perhaps, but you could ask the question straight out, Mr. Truman.
Okay. While you were there, did the defendant take vital signs of Mr. Cochran?
She did.
Now, did you participate in any of that?
I did not.
Did you actually see the raw data?
I did not.
Did she tell you what the results of her taking those vital signs were?
She would say what it was, but I don't remember those numbers.
That's all the questions the state has, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Victor?
Were you there when the physician assistant arrived?
No, I was told to leave while she was on her way.
Okay. So you don't know whether any other person took any vital signs or temperature, vital signs, sugar level of Mr. Cochran.
No, Natalie's the only one I've seen.
All right. That's all. Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Truman?
We know that the defendant had a working phone because she was able to text you, and you text back, correct?
Correct.
In your presence, did she ever call 911?
No.
Two objectives outside of the scope of my
Overruled. Go ahead.
Did she?
No.
Were you and Jonathan Miller capable of loading Mr. Cochran into a car and taking him to the hospital?
Very much so, yes.
Did she ever suggest you do that?
No, we actually asked her if she wanted us to.
What was her response?
No.
That's all the state has.
Well, then, in that regard, did you know, from talking to Michael, or anybody else for that matter, that Mr. Cochran refused to go to the hospital? And for that matter, that he would say that he will never again go to the hospital after his October and November 2018 experience.
He said he would never go back to Raleigh General Hospital.
Okay. He didn't like the hospitals, did he?
Who does?
Who does? So just because he was there at home doesn't necessarily mean that he wanted to be taken to the hospital immediately, does it? Especially that he didn't like going back to the hospital. Fair enough?
I don't know. I wasn't able to ask him.
Right. Okay, that's all.
Anything further?
Not from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any reason to hold this witness over?
Not from the state's perspective. No, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowen. You may step down. You are excused, sir. Call your next witness, Mr. Truman.
State calls J.C. Stevens.
Your Honor, may we take just a moment before Mr. Truman questions Mr. Stevens? I need to confer with my colleague for just a moment.
Okay. Are you asking for a break, or can you do it while we're all here?
Just a couple minutes.
Okay.
That's all, Your Honor.
All right. If you'll raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may have a seat. All right, Mr. Truman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tell us your name, please.
My name is Joseph Stevens, and my last name is spelled Stepheens.
And are you employed?
Yes, I currently work at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, FBI being the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
And do you have a job title?
I do. I'm a chemist forensic examiner at the lab there in the chemistry unit.
And what's your primary duties as a chemist for the FBI?
My primary duties are to receive evidence from contributors. Those contributors can be state, local, or federal partners. We receive that evidence through our evidence management unit, and that's passed up to the individual units, such as myself.
Your Honor, I hate to interrupt, but could Mr. Stevens slow down just a little bit? I'm having a little trouble following his testimony.
All right. And perhaps you can scoot up a little bit towards the microphone and slow down just a little bit, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Truman.
Go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
So we receive evidence from our evidence management unit. It comes up to our chemistry unit where it's assigned to an examiner, such as myself. I then intake that evidence, check it in, determine what kind of evidence I have, what kind of analyses I need to do. And then I process that evidence and I issue a report. This will be a forensic report or a laboratory report. And then as needed, I testify to those observations and findings that I made.
How long have you worked for the FBI?
I started working at the FBI in April of 2016, so I've been there for a little more than 8 years.
And you started as a forensic chemist, and that's what you do now?
That is correct.
And, what kind of experience did you have before you went to work for the FBI as a forensic chemist?
Before the FBI, I worked at the United States Secret Service in Washington, D.C. They have a forensic document laboratory. There I performed instrumental analysis on inks, papers, and toners, and I did that for about 10 years. I started there in December of 2005 through April of 2016.
Would you please share with us your educational background?
I earned a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Roanoke College in Virginia. After that, I attended Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. I did not earn a degree from that, but I transferred to the George Washington University, where I earned a Master of Science in Forensic Science in 2007.
Did you receive any specialized training in forensic chemistry?
Yes. So as part of my training at the United States Secret Service, I completed a 2-year training program there. And upon my arrival at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I completed another 2-year training program there as well.
In this particular case, do you have any specialized training that would qualify you to determine an analysis that would result in a finding of insulin?
Yes. So as part of our 2-year training program at the FBI, I conducted practicals, which I work with insulin, putting it on my instrumentation and analyzing it. And then I'm eventually given what's known as a competency test to ensure that I know how to perform the analysis. And I successfully completed that competency test. And then there's also other components of that training, such as oral boards, where a panel of my peers evaluate my knowledge on topics.
Your Honor, at this point, the state, subject to defense inquiry, moves that the witness be treated under 702 as an expert.
Do you wish to engage in voir dire, Mr. Selden?
No, Your Honor.
Is there any objection to the state's request?
No, Your Honor.
This witness will be regarded as an expert in his described field.
Yeah.
He was so confused that he didn't even remember driving his own car.
He remembered driving his truck. He just didn't remember where he parked.
He wasn't confused about who drove the truck? No? Okay. He told you on several occasions that he felt sick. How was he sick? What did he tell you?
It was after we got finished working on a house that he had gotten into some black mold. He would just complain about dizziness and stuff.
Did he complain about dizziness and lightheadedness in January of 2019?
I don't recall.
Did he complain about feeling sick in February, at the beginning of February of 2019?
I don't recall February. I would say more in December.
More in December. Well, he told you he had a seizure in, I would imagine, December or January, December of 2018 or January 2019, didn't he?
I don't recall him
You don't
telling me
recall.
about a seizure. No.
Okay? And he told you at the beginning of February, didn't he, that he felt another one coming? Didn't he?
No.
Now you're denying that? Okay. What did he complain of, sir, when he was telling you that he didn't feel good?
He would complain about just not feeling right, just feeling dizzy.
Not feeling right, how?
Felt like he said he felt like he'd been poisoned.
He felt like he was poisoned. All right. Did you witness Mr. Cochran's illness in November of 2018?
I was with him in the hospital.
Okay. He lost consciousness, right?
He never lost consciousness. I think they sedated him while he was in the hospital.
He felt lightheaded. Right? He had a seizure, perhaps?
I don't know.
Okay. You don't really know the exact problems that Mr. Cochran had that landed him in a hospital in November of 2018, do you?
No.
Okay. And he complained to you about the same symptoms in December and January, or December 2018 and January 2019, that he had when he went to the hospital in October or November of 2018, didn't he?
I wouldn't say it was the same symptoms, no.
No? Yeah. You went to the Cochran's home on numerous occasions, you testified.
I did.
The bedroom in the Cochran's home was upstairs, correct?
All the bedrooms was.
Okay. And the kitchen was downstairs. And it was not directly, well, and the steps leading to, well, from upstairs to downstairs were not exactly leading straight to the kitchen. The kitchen was still some rooms away from the stairs, right?
Correct.
So if somebody well, let me strike that. Michael was a pretty big guy, wasn't he? How much did he weigh, to your estimation?
Probably 200 pounds.
200 pounds. And so if he was injected with some poison in bed upstairs, a singular person such as Natalie Cochran would have to drag him downstairs all the way to the stairs, then downstairs, and then through the whole house into the kitchen, right? Would you consider that possible?
Assuming that's what happened.
Assuming that's what happened. There was nobody else in the house when you arrived, correct?
Correct.
With Mr. Miller, right?
Just me and Mr. Miller, yes.
Right. And so the only person who would have injected him in the bed and upstairs and who would drag him downstairs would have been Natalie Cochran, right?
I mean, this is pretty speculative.
Yeah, I think it is. Is that an objection,
Okay.
Mr. Truman?
It is, I'm
All right.
sorry.
I think I'll sustain the objection. And Mr. Bowen, if you could say yes or no, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
I'm having a little difficulty understanding your responses.
I apologize, Your Honor.
No problem.
Mr.
Go
Bowen,
ahead.
when you were, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Mr. Bowen, when you were in the Cochran's house on February the 6th,
Yes.
did you observe my client, Natalie Cochran, checking Mr. Cochran's blood sugar?
I did.
She did that, didn't she? All right. You knew Mr. Cochran as a, well, let's say, bodybuilder, an athlete, right?
He was definitely an athlete, yes.
Yes. He really cared about his
His
physique,
physique.
his health, his body.
Yes.
But he cared about his health in terms of his outward appearance, right?
He liked he liked feeling healthy.
He was what? I'm
He
sorry.
liked feeling healthy.
Feeling healthy. And would you say that he was very happy when he was physically fit?
I would.
So in pursuit of that fitness, sir, would you agree with me that he was taking a lot of pills that were going to increase his appearance, right?
I don't know about that. I know he took supplements. There's many kinds of supplements.
All kinds of supplements, right?
Yes.
To increase his vitality, to increase his physicality. Right.
Yes.
Well, how many of the, well, do you know what those supplements were?
I do not.
Well, how many of them did he take?
I don't know.
Well, you were in their home frequently. Did you witness Mr. Cochran taking as many as 30 and 35 pills at a time?
I did not.
You did not? What did you witness?
I never witnessed him taking any supplements.
Okay. So how do you know that he was taking supplements? He told you?
He told me.
All right. Did you also know that he was injecting medicine into his body?
I did not.
Okay. Did he ever tell you that?
No.
Right. What did Michael Cochran do for a living?
He ran data cable, AV cable. It was his profession.
Okay. Well, did he have two businesses that he ran? TSM, or TSG, whatever.
Yes, TSM. He ran with Natalie.
Did he ever talk to you about the government contracts?
He
What
did.
he say? What did he say? He did for those government contracts.
He said he would research the government contracts online and send them to Natalie, and she would work on it and put a bid in.
He would research them, right?
He would find the contract, the specific listings for what they was doing.
Okay. Did you know that he suffered from brain swelling?
I was told yes,
Who told you that?
Natalie.
Did you? Were you curious after he came out of the hospital in November of 2019 what they told him about his health?
Yeah, I was curious. We was told that it was exposure to black mold.
It was just the exposure to black mold. Nobody mentioned anything about seizures. Nobody mentioned anything about enlarged heart. Nobody mentioned anything about brain swelling.
No.
Nobody. Okay. And who would that be? The doctors?
Natalie's who we got all of our information from.
Natalie. And did you inquire of Mr. Cochran himself? Buddy, what's wrong with you? What was wrong with you? What did the doctor say? Did you ever inquire?
We would ask him how he's feeling today or something like that, but he never told us any kind of diagnosis or anything like that. We never really talked about it. Once we was in the hospitals, when we got the information, we would just see how he's feeling day to day.
You familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Before we get to that point, how is it that States 9 came into your possession?
This case came in through our Pittsburgh field office, which is the field office responsible for this area. So it came in as a case submission through Pittsburgh.
And what were you asked to examine, not only this, but the rest of the documents, the items we're going to review with you? What were you asked to examine them for?
I was submitted 4 items. One of them was a box, and 3 of them were vials containing unknown substances or unknown liquids. I was asked to analyze the unknown liquids within those vials.
And there's another item in that package, correct?
Yes, there is.
You got 10, sticker 10. I'm gonna have to do it on- I'll just put it on the individual. You've got a package in here. I'll bring it back to you. If you could put, probably the easiest way to do it, how do you want to handle the bottle? You can put it right on everything. Okay. Yeah, that's anywhere. Bottom's fine, that's good. And what's been marked for identification is States 10. You identify that, sir?
The item states exhibit number 10 is a vial of methylprednisolone acetate that I received in the lab.
Let's go ahead and get all the exhibits in front of you.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that answer in that we have not established what was in the vial. The only thing that can be testified to at this junction is that it is a vial with a label marked methylprednisolone acetate.
Seriously? That's your objection?
I think that's where we are in the process, and hopefully we'll find out more. I'm going to overrule the objection.
Okay. Have this marked as 11, please.
Number 11, Your Honor.
Very well.
Done. Approach the witness, please.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Handy what's been marked for identification is States 11. Ask you to identify that.
Do you happen to have a pair of scissors? This is still sealed.
This is the one with scissors. Okay. Don't run with those.
Thank you.
Can you identify that, sir?
This is a vial of dried material now was labeled in the lab as item 2-1, but it states exhibit number 11 that I generated as a result of my analysis.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand any of that. What was that vial?
Thought you didn't want him to answer that.
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet.
No.
I'm going to
His
overrule the
identification,
objection.
I couldn't understand what he was classifying that as. I'm just asking him to repeat it a little slower if possible.
So this item was the liquid contents removed by me from State's Exhibit number 10.
Thank you.
If I could have this marked as States 12, please.
Very well.
Of course I will. Maybe. Yeah, approach the witness, please.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what's been marked for identification is States 12. Ask you to take a look at that.
This is a bottle that's labeled as enclomiphene citrate that I received in the lab.
Put it back in the bag if you want to. Because of the number, which one of these do you want? 13. Your Honor, if I could have State's Exhibit 13 marked here, please.
Okay.
This is number 13, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stevens, I hand you what's been marked for identification as States 13 and ask you to take a look at that, please. You recognize that?
Yes, this is the liquid that I removed from State's Exhibit 12.
Okay. Oops. If I could have this 14, please.
This is number 14, Your Honor.
Very well.
Once again, if I could approach the witness, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Hand you what's been marked for identification as States 14. have, I believe, with you number 15.
It's 14.
Right, but he's also got 15. We need a separate.
15 needs to be marked, is that right, Mr. Truman?
It does, Your Honor. Thank you.
This is 15, Your Honor.
Very well.
And Your Honor, I'll hand this to the witness if that's acceptable.
Yes.
Thank you. Hand you what's been marked for identification as states 15. Recognize that.
Yes, that's the liquid contents I removed from State's Exhibit 14.
Mr. Stevens, explain to us the procedure that when you received this, what did you do with these items?
The first thing I did is administrative. It's we call it a check-in,
Okay.
where I analyzed, where I visually inspect these and see what kind of things I received. So the first thing I noticed was the box, which is State's Exhibit 9. The next thing was the first vial that I came across, State's Exhibit 10. And the contents of that, which have been labeled as State's Exhibit 11. I got another vial, State's Exhibit 12. The contents of that vial, State's Exhibit 13. And a third vial, and its liquid contents. So I had 3 vials, and then of those 3 liquids that were generated. And I just took inventory of what I had, what the bottles were labeled as, what markings they might have had on them, what lot information they had. If they had a manufacturer, what was that manufacturer? So that visual examination was first.
I think I failed to ask you to identify 14.
State's Exhibit 14 is a vial that's labeled as Humalog Insulin List Pro. 10 milliliters, 100 units per milliliter.
In summary fashion, tell us what you did to perform your analysis.
So each of these items goes through a standard operating procedure or a technical procedure where we analyze them. We use scientific instruments to analyze them. We compare them to references where practical, and then we determine the results of those analyses.
Take a look at 10, please. What was your analysis of that?
So for State's Exhibit 10, I determined that State's Exhibit 10, the vial labeled methylprednisolone acetate, and the liquid that came out of it, State's Exhibit 11, is the one I actually tested.
Explain that to us, please.
So State's Exhibit 10 is the physical vial. State's Exhibit 11 was the liquid recovered from that vial, the liquid that came out of this vial. So my analysis was on the liquid.
Okay. Now, the State's 11, that was lab material. You have a inventory of bottles that you use for your analysis. Is that what that is?
We have libraries and reference materials that we use, yes.
Okay, but the actual container itself, I mean, did that come with the information that came to you, or was that just some kind of testing process that you used?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, as I understood what your testimony was, you analyzed the contents of number 10 by putting it into 11.
I didn't analyze the contents of 10, the vial. I transferred those contents to State's Exhibit 11.
That's okay.
And then I analyzed State's Exhibit 11.
So, we're on the same page now, I think. Go ahead and explain what you did.
So visual examination on 10, what were the labels and markings on the bottle, then chemical analysis on the liquid that was within this bottle.
And again, in summary fashion, what did you do to analyze State's 11?
State's Exhibit 11 was subjected to 3 different other kinds of testing. They're all scientific instrumentation. One of them is known as Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. The next one, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry. And the final one, we call DART-TOF-MS, which stands for Direct Analysis in Real Time, Time of Flight Mass Spectrometry. All of these are very expensive, complicated instruments. Their primary goal is to determine the chemical composition of the materials within a liquid or a solid.
What's the number of that one? What's the number of that one?
10, 11, 12.
Okay. Go ahead and talk about 12,
Yes.
please. What was number 12?
12 was a vial labeled enclomiphene citrate, 30 milliliters, and on that vial it says for research purposes only, not for human consumption. That was the vial. This vial generated States Exhibit 13, which is the liquid that came out of that vial.
And so you actually performed your examination on States 13, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And tell us again in summary fashion, what did you do with States 13?
States Exhibit 13 was subjected to the same analytical scheme as States Exhibit 11, Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, or FTIR, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, GCMS, and DART-TOF MS, direct analysis in real time, time of flight, mass spectrometry.
And this one's 14? And 14, what did you do with States 14 when you received it?
So visually examined it, determined that it was labeled insulin, Lispro, and Humalog, and then separated the content into a new vial, States Exhibit 15, the liquid, and analyzed the liquid.
And that's the analysis you conducted on States 15?
That is correct.
Was your analysis such that you could conclude what was contained in those bottles that you received?
Yes.
And what conclusions did you reach?
For the vial that was labeled methylprednisolone acetate and the liquid that was tested, States Exhibit 11, is my determination that that States Exhibit 11 was consistent with containing methylprednisolone acetate. In other words, the chemical that is on the vial, it was consistent with containing the chemical labeled on the vial.
And I forgot the number, but the next one you analyzed.
States Exhibit 12, the bottle labeled enclomiphene citrate, was my conclusion that the liquid that came out of that, States Exhibit 13, was consistent with containing glycerol and letrozole. I'll remind you that the bottle is labeled enclomiphene citrate, so it was not what was labeled on the bottle.
The stuff according to the label was not the stuff you found.
That is correct.
And last, the next exhibit.
This was States Exhibit 14, the vial labeled Humalog insulin Lispro, is my conclusion that is consistent with containing human insulin or Humalog.
From the information provided, you took a number of photographs of the items that you've been reviewing with the jury today, correct?
Yes.
Could I have that mark, please?
State Exhibit number 16, Your Honor.
Okay.
Oops, excuse me. Ran out of arm.